Hey, my friend, I'm Dr. Lee Warren. I am a neurosurgeon and an author. And if you're getting this, you probably are subscribed to my newsletter on Substack, the Self-Brain Surgery newsletter. If you're not, I'd invite you to check that out, drleewarren.substack.com. And I'm just coming at you today with a special episode, free episode, because I want to talk about the 4th of July. The 4th of July, of course, is Independence Day in the United States. And if you're in America, it's the day that we wave flags and celebrate our independence from Great Britain, the day that the Declaration of Independence was signed, the day that we said we're going to be a free and independent country. And the 4th of July is pretty special to me. I hope it's special to you too. And you need to recognize, especially, we don't seem to talk about it as much these days in the divided political climate in which we live, but people literally died for you to have the freedom to vote, to express your opinion, to have freedom of speech, to have freedom of the press, to have the right to bear arms if you want to. The things that we are uniquely known for in this country, those rights didn't come without a price. Some people died for you in the American Revolution and the War of 1812 and the American Civil War. And those people have spilled their blood all across history in foreign countries to defend democracy and help other people achieve freedom. Freedom is a big deal. And July 4th always reminds me of the time that I spent in Iraq in 2004 and 2005. I was a combat neurosurgeon at Balad Air Force Hospital at Balad Air Base, and I did about 200 brain surgeries in a tent hospital during the height of the Iraq War. We were mortared over 100 times. We had rocket attacks and mortar attacks almost every day. And I took care of a lot of not just American and coalition forces, but also insurgents and the bad guys, Iraqis and terrorists, and also a lot of civilians, Iraqi children and women and men who were injured in the line of fire, sometimes just for being friendly to American troops or helping us translate or interpret, sometimes just being in the wrong place at the wrong time and caught in harm's way. But we took care of a lot of people, and I remember them. I still dream about some of them. I still remember them sometimes when I have nightmares or flashbacks or when I hear fireworks. Frankly, in the 4th of July, it wasn't very fun for our kids to grow up because I didn't like fireworks very much. If you're a Vietnam veteran, if you've been to the Gulf Wars or Afghanistan, that mortars sound an awful lot like fireworks. And so sometimes that's not the most comfortable thing to experience. And so I didn't like that very much. It took me years to get to where I was comfortable around loud noises and those kinds of things again. And if you're a combat veteran or a veteran of a war, you know what I'm talking about. If you've been through something that generated PTSD, that things can cause you flashbacks. And so on Independence Day, on this day, July the 4th, I think a lot about my time in Iraq. And by the way, if you've never read my book, No Place to Hide, that's my story, my memoir of my time in the Iraq War and what that war did to me and to my family and to the things that happened to me afterwards when I first started having flashbacks and symptoms of PTSD, and how I wrote my way out of that at Lisa's suggestion and at the suggestion of my friend Philip Yancey. And that's my story. It's got some pictures of me in combat and in the hospital there in Iraq. It's some of the people we took care of and some of the colleagues that I was there with. It's got some interesting photography and lots of stories about what happened and what it was like and what I felt. And if you just want an honest take on what it's like to be at war, what it's like to come home and deal with the baggage of war, then I would recommend that you check out my book, No Place to Hide. If you can't buy it, check out your local library. They may have it or be able to get it through an interlibrary loan. There's lots of different ways to read it. There's an audiobook too that's on Audible. I did not narrate that one. There's a story behind that too. The book came out shortly after we lost our son, and I just wasn't ready to narrate an audiobook. But the audiobook was expertly narrated by a guy who has done a lot of other books for Philip Yancey and Max Lucado and a bunch of other folks, and Chip Arnold is his name, and he did a great job with the audiobook. But I just want to tell you one story from my time in Iraq, and I think it'll be helpful to you as you think about Independence Day and as you give thanks and be grateful, hopefully, for the things that are free that sometimes we even take for granted. I remember a day, I was there in the first half of 2005, and in March of 2005, because we had fought a war to set them free, the nation of Iraq had their first free elections since the 1960s, since before Saddam Hussein had come to power. And they were able to go and cast their votes for who their own leaders were going to be. And the people had to stand in line, and there were a lot of bombs and a lot of snipers, and a lot of things happened that day because the insurgents did not want those people to declare their freedom and have the right to vote. And so the way that they ensured that voting would be fair and accurate and there wouldn't be any voting fraud is that people who voted had to dip their thumbs in blue ink. And so everybody that voted had blue ink on their thumbs. And I was called to the hospital to take care of a young boy who had been caught in a mortar attack while his father waited with him in line for his father to be able to vote. And the boy had a pretty serious head injury, and I took care of him, and he was going to survive. And I remember, like it was yesterday, going out to talk to the dad and tell him that his son was going to make it. His son was going to be okay. And he said, then this is a very happy day. And he gave me a hug, which is a little unusual because the culture with different religions and different cultural ideas, that the people didn't often make physical contact with us. It was unusual for them to do that. But he gave me a big hug and thanked me through an interpreter for saving his son. And he said, this was a very happy day for 2 reasons. And I said, what are the 2 reasons? And he said, well, you saved my son and I got to vote. And he held up his thumb. It was purple. And it just stunned me that somebody would equate their son's life almost being lost and their ability to have their son back and the joy that brought and must have brought to him with this same ability to exercise freedom, to cast a vote, to determine your own future, to have the ability to have some agency in what happens to you in your life. And we take that for granted in America. As it turns out, 2024 here is an election year. So there's an election coming up. I certainly won't tell you who to vote for, but I will tell you it is important that you vote. Get out and cast your vote. Exercise that freedom. The Bible says that it's for the very sake of freedom that Christ has set us free. God thinks it's important that you have freedom. People have shared their blood. People have spilled their blood in this country and across the world in the service of freedom so that you could exercise your right to your civil responsibility, really, to vote. To cast your vote, to make your voice heard, to speak up and say, this is what I believe in for my country and my future. Cast your vote. Don't forget, freedom isn't free, my friend. That's my message for 4th of July. I hope that you have a great time with your family. I hope you're not having to work. I hope that you get to celebrate and do fireworks or make s'mores or roast hot dogs or whatever it is that you do on the 4th of July. But I do hope you'll take a moment, at least in your mind, to bow the knee and that have given everything for the sake of your freedom, to make a vow to yourself that you're going to vote, that you're going to be involved, that you're going to speak up and stand up for the things that matter. And if you're interested, take a look at my book, No Place to Hide. It's my story, my war story, my freedom story. I think it'll help you. I think it might be interesting to you. We hope, Lisa and I pray for you. We hope that you have an incredible day. We hope that wherever you are in the world, that you find and embrace freedom today. And you can remember that you can't change your life until you change your mind. And changing your mind, by the way, is how you get free from all the things that hold you back, the things that hinder you, the things that trip you up, the things you're grieving and mourning and stuck over, the beliefs, the systems that you have, and the thought processes you've been stuck in. You can be free of them if you're willing to change your mind. That's what we do here on Self-Brain Surgery all the time. So I invite you to come back, read the newsletter, listen to the podcast, check out my books. But today, don't forget, there's a cost to your freedom. You deserve to cast your vote, to be involved in that, to recognize the people who have gone before you. And the good news about all of this, my friend, is that you can start today.